We live in a risk society, a moment of global hysteria, a time in which everything is a construct of fear, where phobias become means by which the social world is ordered and in which responses are formulated. In such a world, the narrative becomes everything. It is power. The ways of speaking about subjects, events, and experiences, and the particular language deployed are central to the relationships between the exercise of power and the constitution of truth. Today, our visual paradigms are also drastically changing. Our paranoia leads us to question even the construct of our visual realities. We've begun to dismantle the linear perspective. The mathematics of art, as put forth by Italian Renaissance painters and architects, no longer deals with the horizon or the vanishing point, but rather the detached, observant gaze of God's eye view, the aerial view. The aerial view has become the new norm, as technological tools of surveillance become seamlessly embedded within our contemporary landscapes. From the Orientalist depiction of the desert of 19th century aerial photography in the Middle East, to the role that satellite imagery of the 1991 Gulf War has played in transforming war reportage, the problematic practices in landscape surveillance perpetuate the narrative of imperialism through the technology of warfare. The language of occupation and colonization has been written into the visualization of landscape. In 2013, Egypt made worldwide headlines for a story about a stork. It was caught and detained after a local resident identified an electronic device attached to its body and suspected it of being a spy device. It was accused of espionage, of being a Zionist spy, and put behind bars. Of course, once it was broadcast in the media, it became a spectacle that was in keeping with the frenzy of the events unfolding in Egypt. At this time, Egypt is in the middle of a grave crisis. The elected President Mohamed Morsi and senior figure of the Muslim Brotherhood was overthrown and jailed by the military on July 3, 2013. In the 2 months since Morsi was toppled, hundreds of his followers have been killed in clashes with the army and the police, including during an event that Human Rights Watch has called, quote, the most serious incident of mass unlawful killings in modern Egyptian history, end quote, where they state that at least 1,000 people were killed on August 14th. Furthermore, an insurgency has flared in the Sinai Peninsula. On Sunday, September 1st, 2013, Nature Conservation Egypt receives an email. Quote, to whom it may concern, we have found out from the media that a white stork with our satellite tracking device was caught in Egypt near Inna, and it is in captivity. Could you get in touch with the authorities and inform them that this is a stork from Hungary, and the device is a wildlife tracking device we attach to it to follow the migration of the bird? Even you can find the details of the bird and the tracking data on our satellite tracking website, end quote. The stork was a native of Hungary and was following the Nile River on his migration to the Lake Victoria Basin in East Africa when villagers in Inna, a city in southern Egypt, spotted him at rest with a white satellite tracker fixed to its body. The bird was one of 115 migrating birds being tracked by a consortium of European wildlife organizations. Inna, a small city in southern Egypt, is most famous for its close proximity to the ancient temples of Dendara, and today has become a major traffic route between Upper Egypt and the Red Sea. Seemingly distant from the events unfolding around the country, the city has an interesting political history that includes an elaborate and complicated story about a secret American military airbase. Here is an account from Larry Grinnell, technical communicator for the U.S. military, whose role was to perform occasional preventative maintenance inspections and certify the destruction of radio operators' classified documents. This is taken from his personal website. Quote, the first COM had an ongoing mission, sending people to a classified location somewhere in the Middle East, simply known to us as Site Alpha. As it turns out, this was the forward base that launched the rescue attempt to bring back the American hostages in Iran, taken when the U.S. Embassy was invaded in 1979. The rescue attempt, Operation Eagle Claw, failed completely due to many factors that are probably still being discussed today. As you might already know, the Iran hostage crisis was a diplomatic crisis in which 52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage for 444 days, on November 4th, 1979 to January 20th, 1980, after a group of Iranian students and supporters of the Iranian Revolution took over the U.S. Embassy. Operation Eagle Claw, as Larry Grinnell mentioned, was an attempt to rescue the Americans held hostage, but failed miserably and damaged U.S. prestige worldwide in the process under President Jimmy Carter. The helicopters were sent from the military base in Inna, Egypt, and all encountered technical problems. 8 helicopters were sent. 1 encountered hydraulic problems. Another got caught in a cloud of fine sand. A third showed cracks in the rotor blade, and lastly, one of the helicopters crashed into a transport aircraft, killing 8 servicemen and 1 Iranian citizen. Grinnell goes on to say, quote, "No one was supposed to know where the base was until they were underway, unless they had the appropriate clearances and need to know. Gee, I thought, just having seen King Tut's riches, this was pretty amazing to be going to the country where he came from. We finally touched down after going around 3 times due to difficult weather at the site, and when I got to the open doorway, my heart sunk. There it was. Miles and miles of miles and miles. This was the real desert with basically nothing." I quickly found out that Site Alpha was a former Soviet airbase, built in the days when the Soviets and the Egyptians were fast friends. Officially, it was known as Wadi Inna. We called it Bumfuck Egypt, BFE for short. Along with Tulle, Greenland, and Minot, North Dakota, BFE was an often mythical place that military training instructors threatened to send you if you didn't get with the program. I think we even had a sign outside base operations that said, "Welcome to BFE." But when local Egyptian military folks and civilian dignitaries visited, the true meaning of BFE was masked with the acronym Beautiful Friendly Egypt. I don't think anyone was fooled, but we did at least try to play the game. The operation was eventually aborted and failed to save the hostages. The embassy hostages were then scattered around Iran to make another rescue attempt impossible. It was Sadat, Egypt's president at the time, who leaked the information of the Americans utilizing a military base in Egypt for the Iran hostages. It was part of his effort to raise the American profile in Egypt, presumably at a time when the U.S. Embassy wanted to maintain a low profile. The deal was that the Americans would use the Egyptian facilities to introduce land-based American air power to the Middle East and the Persian Gulf. This was not a very surprising move, considering the development of aerial technologies in the region. However, it seems bumfuck Egypt is not the luckiest of places. It is also where our spy stork friend faces his demise. A German engineer first attached a camera to a pigeon in 1908 to take aerial photographs. Dr. Julius Neubrunner patented the pigeon cam, a camera attached to a homing pigeon activated by a timing mechanism. Neubrunner was an apothecary near Frankfurt and started receiving his prescriptions from a sanatorium in Falkenstein using pigeon post. He then thought, well, if a pigeon can carry drugs, surely it can carry a camera. He fitted a light miniature camera with a harness weighing up to 75 grams, and the birds were already accustomed to carrying such weight. The Imperial Patent Office accepted his invention, which he called Method and Device for Photographing Sections of Terrain from the Bird's Eye Perspective in 1908. It wasn't long before the pigeon cam inspired the German military intelligence to do the same. It was in fact reported that the German army was training pigeons for photography in 1932, leading up to the Second World War. It is not difficult to imagine where such innovations have led us today, and it was only a matter of time until real animals started being replaced by artificial ones. Sound, please. This robotic bird, known as the smart bird, was designed by a research laboratory at Festo, a German industrial control and automation company based in Esslingen am Neckar. They specialize in lightweight material and advanced pneumatics. The movements of the bird have been precisely engineered to match the patterns of a seagull. A paradigm shift thanks to bionics with SmartBird, Festo is transferring a natural principle to a field of technology. They are exploring what they call bionic thinking. And their goal is to, quote, learn from nature and transfer that knowledge into technology to improve the production of the future, end quote. But to what end? Sound, please.
पाकिस्तान के सरहदी जिले चमन की हुदूद में एक मशकूक तैयारा गिरकर तबाह हो गया था। एफसी हुक्काम के मुताबिक ये तैयारा पाक अफगान बाबे दोस्ती से 400 मीटर के फासले पर गिरा। हुक्काम ने तैयारे का मलबा तहवील में लेकर एफसी कैंप मुंतकिल कर दिया। ज़राए के मुताबिक बगैर पायलट के इस तैयारे में जदीद कैमरे और जासूसी के आलात भी नस्ब थे। आइए जरा इस तैयारे की हकीकत जानने की कोशिश करते हैं। कुछ अर्सा कबल अमेरिका में एक ऐसा छोटा तैयारा तैयार किया गया था जो बिल्कुल परिंदे की तरह परवाज करता था। परिंदों की तरह अपने पर फड़फड़ा कर उड़ने वाला ये तैयारा सारस से मुशाबिहत रखता है। इसका नाम स्मार्ट बर्ड रखा गया और इसे दूर से रिमोट कंट्रोल के जरिए चलाया जा सकता है। दूर से अगर कोई ये तैयारा देखे तो इसे परिंदा ही समझे, लेकिन है ये असल में जासूस तैयारा। अब तो फिजा में भी नजर रखनी पड़ेगी कि कौन सा परिंदा असली है और कौन परवाज की आड़ में जासूसी करता फिरता है।
This is also bionic thinking. The reporter in this video states in Urdu voiceover, "From now onwards, we will have to watch the skies carefully to check whether a bird is real or it is a spy." According to an eyewitness account, quote, "This unmanned aerial vehicle had 2 spy cameras and it crashed near the Frontier Corps headquartered in Shaman, a border township with Afghanistan," end quote. However, the drone that you saw in this footage was not actually a smart bird, even though the news piece suggests that, but rather it is purported to be an altered Lockheed Martin Desert Hawk, a surveillance drone which had been officially retired by the US Air Force in 2007. It remains unclear, however, who had been flying the drone in this particular location, and more importantly, for what purpose. To instill more fear and paranoia? Well, that would not be so far-fetched. Waziristan, in fact, has seen the most heavy bombardment by drone strikes, with a total of 425 strikes in the last decade, and between 2051 and 4,003 casualties, 84 of which are identified as members of Al-Qaeda, according to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. Techno-aesthetics are inherently tied to the greater Middle East. From land surveying to aerial mapping to bombing and drone warfare, military technologies throughout the 20th and 21st centuries were developed against the backdrop of Middle Eastern geographies. In the early 20th century, the British military went to lengths to understand the Arab mindset, to better understand and ultimately control the territories in the Middle East through aerial surveillance. The image of the Arab pervades the aerial imagination. Today, the United States has the most comprehensive and aggressive drone program in the world. They lead the world in drone technology. When American Army strategists imagine what drones will be like in 25 years, they begin by getting an infographist to create a composite image of a typical Arab town, complete with mosque, other buildings, and palm trees. They use a so-called pattern of life analysis to locate anonymous militants based on evidence collected by surveillance cameras. This means they flag anyone as a potential bad guy if, for example, their daily routine sees significant changes. So let's say you have a particular routine. You go to work, you go to the gym, you meet friends for dinner, etc. If you are being surveilled, a spatio-temporal map can relay the patterns of your life. If you do something that deviates from this pattern, you could be flagged. As one drone operator indicates, quote, "We can develop those patterns of life, determine who the bad guys are, and then get the clearance and go through the whole find, fix, track, target, attack cycle." Obviously, this is not error-free. In fact, way too often firing is decided on arbitrary pattern of life indicators, and obviously innocent people are being killed. The White House kill list criteria is unknown and based on blindfolded trust. They are literally tracking the behavior from the sky. Even though we see the images of another land, the objective of drone wars is no longer about territory, as was the colonial project, but rather how to eradicate a terrorist threat from a distance. But it was Israel who had discovered the potential of RPVs, or remotely piloted vehicles, after they had inherited a few machines scrapped by the Americans who momentarily had abandoned the development of their drone program in the 70s. In 1969, the Israeli Air Force was using drones to photograph and monitor Egyptian, Syrian, and Jordanian troops, and by 1973, in the Yom Kippur War, they sent out a wave of drones to mislead enemy defenses. The Egyptians used up all their artillery, and they were able to attack while Egyptians were reloading. This was the first time drones were officially used in battle. Again, the Middle East became a backdrop to advance the technologies of warfare. The drone, as a weapon, presents us with the terrifying prospect of warfare that is completely detached from the physical body. The power structures at play are dependent on the might of the machine, which, as we have come to know, has no bounds. In 1869, Quinby of Wilmington, Delaware, invented a new and improved flying machine. Quinby states in his application that his improvements intended to provide an arrangement of temporary sails resembling in some respect the wings of birds. Like him, many before Quinby attempted to acquire bird-like characteristics. In fact, the Bible itself has prompted many scholars and inventors to conceive of flying machines or bird-like machines inspired by the following passage from the book of Isaiah. Quote, "As birds flying, so will the Lord of hosts protect Jerusalem. He will protect and deliver it. He will pass over it and preserve it." End quote. After taking up his command in Cairo in June 1917, Lord Allenby, the commander-in-chief of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, had been given explicit orders by the Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, to capture Jerusalem by Christmas. This was in the wake of two failed efforts by his predecessor, Sir Archibald Murray, to conquer Gaza, a necessary condition for the conquest of Palestine from the Ottoman Turks. Lord Allenby was a believer in Bible prophecy. He was a religious man and did not want to destroy the holy places in the city of Jerusalem. Convinced by biblical scholars to move forward based on this biblical prophecy of as birds flying, Allenby ordered as many planes as possible to fly over Jerusalem. It is said that at that time the Turks had never seen so many planes in the sky and were terrified by their presence. He ordered pilots to send down leaflets commanding the Turks to surrender. The flyers read, "Surrender the city today, Allenby." Allenby in Arabic can only be written in one way, al-Nabi, which means prophet or son of God. What he did not know was that the Turks also believed in an old prophecy that they would never lose the holy city until a man of Allah came to deliver it. The Turks surrendered without firing a shot, an incredible fulfillment of biblical prophecy which put Israel under British mandate. This mandate, called the Balfour Declaration, called for a Jewish homeland and set the foundation for modern Israel. In fact, the following version of the story is seldom told, and probably because the socio-political transformation of the entire region was prompted by hens. According to the witness account of Major Vivian Gilbert, relayed in detail in his book from 1928 called The Romance of the Last Crusade with Allenby to Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem was in fact surrendered to the general's cook, who was out on a mission to fetch some eggs. On December 9th, 1917, the eggs were spoiled. So British Private Murch, a cook from London, was sent off alone with his rifle to the next village to get eggs for the commander's breakfast. He, of course, as an incompetent soldier, got lost in the fog and dust and accidentally stumbled on a group of men who greeted him with a set of keys. Hussein Effendi al-Husseini, the mayor of Jerusalem, wanted to surrender the city to the cook. "I don't want your keys," he says. "I want some eggs." Upon his return, Private Murch relayed his amazing adventure, and his commanding officer promptly declared the fall of Jerusalem. Not to be outdone, the divisional commander ordered the keys to be returned to the mayor, who had to wait for him to come and receive them. The city, in fact, was surrendered 4 times, first to the cook, then to Brigadier Watson, who accepted the surrender. Then it was cancelled by Commander Shia, who accepted the surrender. Then the former 2 surrenders were cancelled by Lord Allenby and demanded that the city be surrendered to him and only him. The 3rd surrender took place without Hussein Effendi al-Husseini because he was ill with pneumonia. And eventually, some suggest from waiting for so long in the cold winter, he died a few days later. Conscious of the city's special meaning for 3 of the world's great religions, in a deliberate act of humility and respect, Allenby entered Jerusalem on foot through the Jaffa Gate on December 11th, 1917. He walked to the citadel from where he read a proclamation that made it clear he came not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. Of course, at this point, Allenby becomes the man of the moment. All eyes were on him. His unprecedented success had made him out to be a hero with religious values and kindness. But most peculiar, however, in his limelight, with the media focus on our new hero, is the emergence of a particular relationship with a bird. Lord Allenby had a pet marabou stork. Perhaps it was biblical fate that strengthened the bond with his bird. Perhaps the bird represents a sort of triumph that he holds dear to his heart, a symbolic embodiment of biblical prophecy. Perhaps it's not a coincidence. But it is this precise relationship that defines the absurdity of this story, the thread that unites the sequence of events. It relays the surreal way in which history is written and highlights the details that often get left out and are eventually forgotten and erased from history. The fantasies and the truths that we hold on to, the regime of truth and the power of narrative. So how does this story end? The spy bird in Inna was given the name Mina, after an ancient Egyptian pharaoh who was credited with uniting Upper and Lower Egypt. Mina, in fact, means he who endures. However, the short-lived success story of getting Mina released was not enough to keep him safe until he exited Egypt. Upon release, he was almost instantly shot down by hunters and eaten by the very people who had questioned him in the first place. They had consumed their paranoia.